Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. I hope you're all doing well. We've got another book review for you today, and we're going to be taking a look at The Master and Apprentice, the Star Wars novel by Claudia Gray. This novel is it's about Qui-Gon Jinn and a young Obi-Wan Kenobi when he was his Padawan still. And this is pre-Phantom Menace, and then it kind of touches on, although it has side stories, it touches on the relationship between Qui-Gon Jinn and Obi-Wan Kenobi. It touches on Qui-Gon's past relationship with Dooku when he was Dooku's Padawan. It touches on Qui-Gon being asked by the Council to join the Council and him contemplating that decision. And then it touches on other things in between. It's a brilliant book. Obviously, like I said, I've been starting to read lately, either physical copies or audiobooks. This one was an audiobook, so I gave this a listen. It was quite a long book in terms of audiobook. At least it felt like it was a long audiobook, but there was a lot of rich detail in there, and conversations and stories between Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan that kind of they really shape up their relationship, and they show how they kind of struggled to mesh together, and then actually became very strong as a team together. And this is, like I say, this is before the Phantom Menace, so this is when Obi-Wan was still a Padawan, and it leads up to the end of the book, touching on the events of Qui-Gon's death and Obi-Wan and his thoughts at that time. But it concentrates on a singular mission, primarily, where just before the mission, Qui-Gon is approached by the council members like Mace Windu, Yoda, etc., and is asked about joining the council, and he's not quite sure. At the time, he is open to the idea, but he still needs to mull it over, and he doesn't immediately tell Obi-Wan Kenobi, and there's still a lot of things he needs to try and contemplate and work out. And it touches on in the book, really interestingly, I thought, on the difficulties that him and Obi-Wan had as a partnership, as a Master and Padawan duo. I never really thought that they struggled as much. They, in the films, in a certain lore, they had made mention to it, but I never thought that there would be kind of the abrasiveness that there was in the book. It was quite interesting. Like Obi-Wan as a young Padawan was, although he was still very much like Obi-Wan, he was quite like Anakin in the sense that he was quite argumentative, but in a different way. Qui-Gon wanted to always, like it says in the book, concentrate on the living force and the right actions, not necessarily just doing right. And Obi-Wan is very by the book, Jedi Teachings, yes, but Master, what about this? And they really struggle to mesh, and it talks about a diplomatic mission turned kind of combat mission they're sent on, and it talks about their relationship, and touches on Qui-Gon's backstory, him as a Padawan learner, his interests in the library and in things outside of just the norm of the Jedi, and it kind of touches on things that lead towards how he was interested in the living force and what happens to us after we die, and that kind of answers those questions that I had about Qui-Gon finding this kind of the Force Ghost form and where all that comes from. And it touches on that, and he's interested as a young Padawan, and Dooku. It talks about how Dooku was interested by Sith holocrons, and that's kind of how he had a gateway into this wondrous stuff that wasn't in the regular Jedi teachings, and kind of it shows how Dooku was very much an individual, and he did things his own way, and that fed down to Qui-Gon. It's kind of why Qui-Gon is who he is, and interestingly, because of that, him and Obi-Wan end up being quite the pair, as you can see, like in the films too, or I said the films in Phantom Menace, because they offset each other quite nicely. Obi-Wan is very by the book and all these other things. He's the negotiator, and Qui-Gon is he listens to the Force, and he feels that doing the right action isn't necessarily doing right. So, like when he cheats on Tatooine with Watto, and he cheats the dice, it's because he believes that it's the will of the Force that this boy be released and trained and things like that. And it was making me think today, actually. I was listening to the Revenge of the Sith novel audiobook actually today as well, and that obviously is heavily based around Obi-Wan and Anakin's thoughts and things like that. And it touched on Qui-Gon then and his messages to Obi-Wan, and it ties in together quite nicely. And one of the things it mentioned is that Qui-Gon assumes that the prophecy meant that Anakin was the chosen one and that he should be trained. He said that it was the will of the Force that he'd be trained as a Jedi, but it actually mentions in the book, it mentions that there is no mention in the prophecy of it being a Jedi. The chosen one is a child born through the Force, which Anakin of course was, but it was it was Qui-Gon who told the council that he should be trained. The council said no, he's too old, all these things. And if it wasn't for Qui-Gon, none of the Anakin Skywalker and Skywalker saga in general, none of it happens. And you kind of don't get a feeling of that until you dive deeper, because obviously us hardcore fans, we are aware of all these stories and the interconnections of them and the lore, but it's kind of like in the behind the scenes episodes of The Mandalorian, when Dave Filoni and Jon Favreau talking about kind of like the story, and Dave talks about how Duel of the Fates is the biggest part. It's the part where the story can go either way, and Qui-Gon's death at that time plays a massive part in the story. And if it isn't for Qui-Gon, Anakin isn't found, trained, and goes on the journey he does. Same with Obi-Wan. He doesn't turn into the Jedi he is if he doesn't go on the kind of journey that he has as Qui-Gon's Padawan. The book was it was a good listen. Like I say, it felt quite long. I don't know if it was necessarily a long book, but it definitely felt as though it was. I think there was over 40 chapters, I believe, but I think that's about the same size as the Kenobi novel, but in this it felt like the chapters were longer. It does go into other things, which is really interesting. It goes into the makeup of a lightsaber and what it's all about and the things that go into it. It touches on just concepts of the Jedi Teachings, things like that, so it's really nice in that way. Like I say, you get a little bit of a backstory and little tidbits about Qui-Gon as a young man, and Dooku and Yoda and all these things, and just listening to kind of Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon, this story is basically, it shows the point where they clicked. So up until this point, they'd been having trouble, and then Qui-Gon was asked to join the council if he so wishes, obviously, but they strongly want him to, and then it's kind of a test for their relationship, him and Obi-Wan. He doesn't tell him straight away, and he hears it through someone else, but then when they're on this mission and they've kind of got themselves into a pickle, they kind of discover that despite all of their difficulties and the fact that they don't naturally mesh together, they just suddenly become in tune with each other, and it's all led to this point, and it all makes sense now. And it's really interesting because that is kind of echoed in the stories with Obi-Wan, Kenobi and Anakin. Just obviously it's different between them, but in like the Revenge of the Sith novel, it talks about how they are a very formidable duo, much more so than they would be alone, and they kind of work hand in hand with each other's strengths and weaknesses. But yeah, it's definitely a good read. I think of the books to give a go, I think this one it's an easy listen. There's not too much terminology that you won't be aware of. There's really not much side character story. There is to build the world around them, but not enough to kind of make you feel like we're getting besides the point here, and we're getting distracted. So it was really good in that sense. I do think that the book was it was a good listen / read for someone who isn't necessarily is clued up on the entire story, because it does make reference at the end to the Phantom Menace, and obviously in terms of canon that would be easier for a light fan to get on board with and understand its connection, but it's also arguably a very good read for someone who is like myself, big Star Wars fan, and wants to jump into the lore, because it's a good starting place. It's very relevant to the canon story we know and love, but it adds in details of their previous relationship that we'd never seen before, and it doesn't kind of challenge anything else we've seen in any other shows. We've only ever seen Qui-Gon. Obviously we've seen bits and pieces of him in visions in the Clone Wars, but apart from that we've only ever seen him in Phantom Menace. So whereas some of these books you have to wrestle between canon and legends and things like that, and just take what you want from the stories and put it on your major timeline as that is canon to me. This one doesn't really challenge that, so it's nice for someone who is a big fan like myself, because it means that it kind of just goes in, it just adds to the canon story without you having to wonder, does it contradict anything? So if I had to give it a score, I'd probably put it up there of like an 8 out of 10. For example, like Plagueis is a 10 out of 10. I thought Darth Plagueis was a fantastic book. This book is great. I just think that in terms of rich story, you're gonna do well to beat the Darth Plagueis novel, because the entire Clone War era is contingent on those master plans and all those details. So obviously that's a really intricate story and really ties everything in together. This helps tie the characters and the storylines together, but not in such a big way, so I would give it an 8. And like I say, it's easy enough language, not too much side story, so I definitely give it a listen. I do think it would be a great read. I just happened to listen to it as an audiobook. It was my first audiobook that I listened to on Audible, and the voice acting was great, the sound effects were great. It really helps immerse you. Like when I'm reading my physical paperback copies, I like to put ambient music on to really, like, sort of Star Wars planets and things like that, to really put me in, get me in the world. This book, in an audible sense, it built the world with its descriptions really well, and like I say, the voice acting was good. And with the sound effects, things like the hum of lightsabers and things like that, it really just enhances the way you experience the story, especially if you're on the go. Like if you're on the go, traveling or working or something, it really helps you stay focused, because it's quite easy to just zone out of what you're doing and not pick up that detail. But I definitely would recommend it. So I hope you've enjoyed this video, guys. I hope you enjoyed that review. Go and check the book out if you do fancy it. I would recommend it. If you're new here, do subscribe to the channel. It helps me out a lot. Leave a like on the video if you enjoy it. A comment if you've got any questions. But for now, guys, I'm going to leave you with that one. Take care, and I'll see you in the next one.